Hi, everyone. I'm Libby Costin. I'm Bexley's transition specialist, and thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Today, I am going to talk a little bit about post-secondary transition services and specifically Section 5 of the IEP. So I know we have a lot of different range of families on here and that will be viewing the recording. So this is just a very broad overview. And I'm going to try to go into a bit of specifics about it as well. Just a little background on myself before I start. Before I was a transition specialist, I was a special education teacher. I'm a licensed intervention specialist, and I worked with students from 5th grade through 12th grade. And I had students that all the way up until 22 before they had to exit school services. So I worked with those students, and a lot of my students that I found weren't really focused on the future planning, weren't talking about goals. It's just when you're focused on school and the curriculum, it's hard to have those conversations. And I was kind of disheartened by this because I felt so highly about my students and the potential that they had. And so I kind of got interested in transition services, got my master's in secondary special ed and transition services. And I've been a transition specialist ever since. So I love this work. I think it's very meaningful and important work. All right, so just some basics on vocabulary. You'll hear post-secondary transition planning as kind of the overarching vocab when it comes to Section 5. And post-secondary just means anything after high school graduation. Transition planning are all of those services and activities that the student will participate in primarily in middle and high school. And the three areas that we focus on in the IEP are education and training, employment, and independent living skills. So for those of you that have students who have Section 5 transition services on the IEP, those typically start when our students are 14. It might be age 13 if the student's turning 14 within that IEP year. And sometimes it can be earlier if appropriate, if the IEP team feels that this discussion in Section 5 needs to be on the IEP at an earlier time. For those of you who are not familiar with Section 5, don't have that on their IEP at this point, the real purpose of Section 5 is to focus on the future. And we want the IEP to be a very fluid document. We want to make sure that the goals in Section 6 are helping our students reach their post-secondary future goals. And so a way to think about Section 5 is just a more in-depth look at the future planning section in Section 1. So focusing on what are the goals for the future. So Section 5, the IEP actually looks like this that's on the screen, and there are three of these same boxes. So the three boxes are in post-secondary training and education, competitive integrated employment, and independent living. And so I'll go into depth as to what each one of those mean. But what I want to really talk about and focus on today are these three parts of each box in Section 5. So the goal, the assessments, and the service and activity. So the goal is just the overarching one sentence. What is the student going to do after graduation? And again, it will be in one of those three areas under Section 5. It's determined by the student. It's what their goal is after school. And it's not the same criteria as our Section 6 annual IEP goals. So it's really, what is the future goal? One sentence to say what they're going to do after high school. For our second box there is age-appropriate transition assessments. We love our acronyms in special education, so you might hear it called AATA, AATA as well. Another acronym there is PINS, which stands for Preferences, Interests, Needs, and Strengths. And this is kind of the ongoing process where we try to figure out what do the students really like, what do they excel at, and how can we kind of foster this passion for a future plan. And then this last area here that we'll talk about are the transition services and activities. And this is actually what the student will be taught, what they'll be instructed on by the staff at Bexley. So just a little bit more about the age-appropriate transition assessments and what we refer to as PINs. So when we talk about preferences in the IEP, these are typically work preferences. So we want to know, do they like inside versus outside work, or with people or alone? And for some of our younger students, what we can focus on here are, where do they excel in the classroom? Do they need to work one-on-one? Do they do okay in group settings? Do they like hands-on work? That can all go into the preferences section. And I think that that's really impactful as we start planning for the future. Some other areas in preferences could be just whether they want to go to college, work, or live with family or alone. So that can all be listed in preferences. For interests, we want to focus on what does the student like to do. And I really like to focus on what they like to do outside of school. I think especially having these conversations in a school setting, students are often saying, you know, I like math, I like history, and that's really important and meaningful. But where do they spend their time? What do they like to do when they have free time? What are they passionate about? For needs, these are going to be the most important needs, what we want to focus that relates to the IEP and how it'll be addressed in Section 5. So the actual activities that we work on in Section 5 come from this area of need. And then last but not least is strengths. So everything the student's good at, again, both in school and out of school. If school isn't an area of strength, that's okay. Where else are they excelling outside of school? What do they do really well? And then lastly, your feedback is super important on this, especially for our younger students, or maybe for our students who can't express themselves as well. It's really important for the family to say, you know, outside of school, this student has this great talent that in school we might not know about. So it's definitely important to share those areas. So just referencing this again, because I know I'm talking about a lot of different areas. So again, this goal is that overarching one sentence statement. What are they going to do after high school? The assessment area, this box is a lot smaller, but usually on the IEP, it's one of the largest boxes in Section 5. And that again is just the students' preferences, interests, needs, and strengths. And then lastly, the service or activity, I'm going to go into a little bit more information about that here. So again, the three areas, post-secondary training and education, again, is just what's going to happen right after school. Competitive integrated employment. The word competitive just means that students are being paid at or above minimum wage. With a similar pay to those without disabilities who perform the same work. Integrated means that the student will be working alongside those without disabilities. And then the final area under Section 5 is independent living skills. So the first area, post-secondary training and education, we are focusing here on both the goal and the service and activities. So those two bottom parts of that IEP snapshot. For post-secondary training and education, this goal is whatever type of program, whatever type of requirements the student needs to reach their employment goal. So some examples are listed here. This is not everything. There are many other programs that students might look into. But typically it could be a college, a technical college, apprenticeship, vocational training program, or on-the-job training. And then the bottom area here are some typical service and activities. that are focused on in Section 5 of post-secondary training and education. We always write it as the intervention specialist will provide instruction, support, whatever it might be. The student's never responsible for making sure that they're doing these activities. This is something that they're actually being taught or instructed in by either the intervention specialist or another staff member at Bexley. So some examples are here that they might meet with a college counselor, they might research, compare, or apply to programs, complete scholarships. Maybe it's focusing on some academic courses that they need to do, applying for entrance exams, touring programs, or working on those organizational skills. For competitive integrated employment, the overarching goal here is what type of work do they want to do? Is it going to be part-time or full-time? Will they need on-the-job training? And some services and activities to help them reach that goal that they will work on with the staff are career exploration, some job soft skills, resume writing, interview prep, or applying for jobs, participating in hands-on jobs in school or the community, and then possibly connection with adult agencies. So this is kind of another topic for another day, but these two organizations help our students while they're in school and then also as adults. So the Board of Developmental Disabilities helps students, typically students with more intensive needs, but they might have support in the home or support on the job. They help with transportation or help with day programs in the future. And then Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities is Ohio's vocational rehabilitation program. They are a really great resource for students who are looking for work. OOD's mission is to get people with disabilities employed. So whatever that takes, if it's to help them go through college, if it's to help them work in the summer, they're a great organization. So if you want more information on them or to set up an intake, just reach out to me specifically about that. And then the last area in Section 5 is independent living. So our overarching goal typically is something to do with either living independently or with support. And then again, independent living can be really broad, what type of skills students need to just be more independent. And some areas to consider are daily living skills, those independent living skills like managing finances, communication skills, problem solving, decision-making skills. And then for some of our students who we're thinking, you know, they will live independently, they won't have any issues with household management or finances. This is a great area to include self-advocacy skills, and especially knowing what their accommodations might be, how to ask for help in a setting after high school. Where I come into the picture at Bexley is that I help as part of the IEP team to just assess different transition needs, provide resources to the team, connect with those adult agencies, promote any different programs or help bring people on tours, and then other individualized support and planning. And then I support the intervention specialists to create and implement transition plans. All right, does anyone have any questions?